Okay, so my last question was, guys, my last question was, who read Sprout? Was that my last? Okay. I read some of it, and I read the most important parts of it, possible answers. So, Sprout is talking about, a lot about economic changes, right? Economic changes lead to rise of towns and a long-distance monetized trade economy. So he emphasizes economy and extraction of resources a lot. So he has quite a historical perspective, and in that perspective, he argues that many different political units, such as city leagues and city states, nation states and empires, should be looked into in terms of how they meet economic demands of the time. How do they help extraction of resources, okay? So some units, such as the sovereign state, has an advantage, and they are more efficient in raising revenues and extracting resources, and also lowering transaction costs. What's the transaction cost? I'm going to trade. Yes. Yes.
Well, economics it's like what we talk about. I think Sprout will talk about like the currencies and the measurements.
Okay.
That if you have different coins all over, like euro, before the euro, you have to exchange them all the time. You have to have these tables of what is one.
That is the story of our lives, right? At this moment, yesterday, actually, I had to exchange my whole annual salary to dollars because I was applying for something and they were asking for the information. So I had to make all these calculations, okay? And in a few weeks, I'll be going to a workshop in the US, so I have to actually look into my budget and I have to see if I should exchange some Turkish lira to the US dollars, or should I use my credit card? And I've been thinking a lot about these issues lately, okay? So imagine every single city has a different coin, meaning has a different currency. So every time you move from one city to another, you have to worry about, do you have enough coins to buy whatever you like to buy? So EU actually made things much easier because of the Eurozone, right? Using Euro was actually quite efficient, and it was quite convenient at the same time for citizens, yes.
But even more important, the money itself is the breakdown of the toll walls, like no customs between the countries.
Yeah, so coins, standardization of currency, plus reducing quotas, reducing tariffs. That's also part of the equation as well. So when you move from place to place, or when you trade with another city, if you are paying a lot of taxes, if you're paying a lot of tariff, that means you are actually not reducing the transaction costs. You're paying for transaction costs. And that actually makes trading very costly. The City League, Hanseatic League, survived as long as it did because it was lowering transaction costs, okay? But in the meantime, the nation-state structure has become the most advantageous structure for reducing transaction costs, according to Sprout, because within a nation-state, all the cities will be using the same currency, and also they'll be using the same laws. Standardization of legal system within nation states is also very important. Remember, I told you that Roman Empire was very huge, and it actually started standardized laws and standardized currency and all. So Roman Empire was quite successful with that. But I can't tell you the same thing for all empires. So nation states were more successful with reducing or lowering transaction costs, according to Sprout. And other than that, he argued that raising armies is also important. So when you have a decent population, you're able to raise armies. And when you actually reduce transaction costs, you have more money. When you have more money, you can transform your money into military power. So at the time then, during the nation building process in Europe, raising armies and economy were very important aspects. Okay? Like I said, the first nation states have become advantages in terms of debt as well. So financial and military advantages are quite emphasized in the argument, in this historical account of Sprout. And he argues that some political units survive because they are naturally selected. Natural selection is a term that you have heard in what? In Darwinism, right? So Darwin talks about natural selection. Who gets naturally selected? Yeah. The most adaptable? Okay. So his argument is the nation state adapted to the changes in the environment. Okay? So Britain, France, and all the others afterwards, they adapted to all the changes in technology and economy also. So if you apply this logic to who will survive, will the nation state survive in the next century? What do you think? Are nation states changing, adapting?
Yes.
How?
Like forming unions like
European Union might actually be one way to adapt to the environment of the economic developments in the world. Okay? After the World Wars, after the 1929 economic crisis, maybe the European states' adaptation to a union might have prevented another war, and it might have added or helped the survival of the European states, right? What else? Is Turkey adapting? While you guys are thinking about it, is Denmark adapting to the new era? Will Denmark as a nation state survive in the next century? You don't think so? Do you think that the European Union will become a more unified political entity? No? So what's happening? Will we survive? Yes. I mean, when I say we, I don't mean we. Will nation states, the structure, the political unit of nation states survive in the next 50 or 100 years? We all die. That was the Maya belief, right? So we are all dying in 2012 anyways. No need to worry about adaptation. Yes?
So it cannot be survive, nation states survive because of the lack of the most important feature that the nation state have, the nation-made identity. Because the world is globalized and the identities will be loose.
Okay.
So, but actually,
Okay.
nationalism is raising a lot, I mean, especially in Europe.
Nationalism is on the rise, you say. But on the other hand, there's this whole globalization argument. The whole world is globalizing argument. But nationalism is also on the rise. Yes? Did you raise your hands? Jalal, did you? No? Oh, okay.
I mean, the identities may change, but state will stay.
So you're saying maybe the state will still adapt to the change in identities. Okay, so, well, in Turkey, nationalism, nationalists have not really voted for the Turkish Nationalist Party in the last elections, but more center-right parties have become more nationalist. So the nationalist discourse have become normalized in center parties, in conservative parties even. So in Turkey, we have both Turkish nationalism and also their arguments on Kurdish nationalism, right? So some people say that these two will clash. Some others say, well, we have lived together for a very long time, so there will not be any clash. So from the perspective of Turkey, Turkey is going through a transformation period in some way or another. If we think about it from the perspective of EU countries, there are countries who say there are scholars who say that EU will not survive, EU will collapse, and we will go back to the nation-state system. Some people argue that the United States will not be as powerful as it used to be, so the US will become a less powerful nation-state. Yes?
I think globalization has also affected what people expect from the nation states and how they relate to them.
How?
So possibly the Arab Spring is a good example. Previously, citizens would accept a lot of things in the name of the national good, in the name of nationalism. Autocratic leaders would justify a lot of their actions. This is for the nation. However, globalization, I think, has undermined this because people see what's going on in other countries, and also mass media affects how people think citizens should be treated. So I think that this is globalization. I don't know if it's destroying nationalism per se, but it's definitely influencing how we relate to the state.
It's changing the nationalist ideology in a way, right? And also, there aren't many states left that are able to keep what's going on inside the country to themselves. Well, North Korea is probably a more closed state at this day and age, but you know, China, even China, a state that has been thought to be quite closed, is not as closed anymore. Well, you can't really access Facebook, but you can actually access many other social media. And also, I was actually, in the weekend, I was thinking that social media has been very effective in the earthquake in Turkey. Right? So people were actually tweeting others for, did you? People were calling for help using Twitter, right? And then Facebook was used to gather help for the earthquake victims. And before that, actually, there were protests of the PKK attacks in the southeast. So Facebook actually gathered, to my knowledge, a huge number of people actually walked to protest the events. So we have definitely a technological revolution in the last at least 10 to 20 years. So the nation state is getting affected by all these changes, guys. And also, don't you think that there are a lot of states who don't believe that they should keep increasing their military power? Many states have started thinking, why am I spending all this money on military equipment and military power? We have actually started discussing if we really need such a huge military, or should our military be a more focused professional military? So all these changes might actually be supporting the argument that Spruit is making, because he says that the nation state adapts, or all the units other than nation state adapts so that they look at the nation state, surviving nation states like England and France, and they actually change their ways of doing things so that they are also going to survive. Okay? So we are kind of talking about a survival of the fittest kind of Darwinist approach to state building here. Okay? So we don't know what will happen in the international system in the next century or in the next 50 years, because we couldn't imagine how internet was going to change, how internet was going to revolutionize the nation states. Well, the Cold War was mostly because, continued mostly because states didn't know what was going on inside. So everyone was shocked. All international relations scholars were shocked when the Soviet Union collapsed. Why? Well, because we didn't know what was going on inside Soviet Union. Soviet Union was a closed box. It was a black box, so we didn't know what was going on, and we kept thinking Soviet Union is extremely powerful. So that's what the United States and US's allies thought. So no IR scholar actually could predict the end of the Cold War. So the whole IR community was shocked and also quite blamed for not knowing, for not predicting that the Cold War would suddenly come to an end. Okay? So guys, we don't really know, because these different technologies and these different ideologies, globalization has become something that we didn't predict either. So all of these things actually change the nature of the nation states. Will they actually completely be eliminated? There are actually historians and scholars, IR scholars and political scientists who argue that the nation state will not survive. It will not adapt anymore. So we are going to go back to, did you guys watch Mel Gibson's Mad Max? Oh, you should, okay. You really should. It is quite a chaotic system where, you know, the state of nature is pretty much the norm in the world at the time. And this is after a major catastrophe took place. I don't know, maybe a nuclear war or something. So the whole thing is pretty much going back to the feudalist times. So some people argue that EU will collapse. And the nation-state system, because of rising ethnic nationalisms, will collapse. And as a result, the whole world will go back to being a more feudal structure, okay, as it was centuries ago. So, yeah.
I also agree that the nation-states will collapse and more city-states will come.
Mm-hmm. If we go back to those times where you have smaller units, then probably security will become more problematic, and military will become, as it was in the past, military will become more important, or military expenditures will increase. Or an alternative could be that, you know, we also mentally, we also change and adapt, and the human race becomes less conflictual. Well, there are those arguments as well. I'm not very hopeful about that. I mean, I'm a conflict, I study conflict. So what I studied so far doesn't really show that human beings are becoming more peaceful. But the way that we make wars is becoming more sterile, and it's becoming more maybe civilized. But I still think that war is very much very much effective in changing the state structure and changing state building processes, okay? For that reason, I'm actually going to talk more about wars.
Can I say something?
Sure.
The nation states will not the nation states cannot have a military force. For example, people do not want to attach to the military. The military power will collapse.
Okay.
So it's about the collapsing of national identity.
Okay. There is definitely a trend of conscientious objection. That's what we call it. There are people who reject serving in military. There are conscientious objection is not a very popular movement in Turkey, but it is growing. And I have some research on that. Conscientious objectors in Turkey, in Israel, they're actually arrested because military service is compulsory in states like Turkey and Israel. So if you just object to it, we don't have a mechanism to replace the military service. In some other countries, if you don't want to serve in the military, you can actually do public service. So you don't want to do the public service as a soldier, you do something else. I don't know, you clean the streets. So there are alternatives to the military service. In Turkey and in Israel, there are no such things. And the trend in the world is the people in this more globalized world, I don't know if it is because of globalization, I really don't know, but people actually learn that they don't actually have to fight or die serving in the military, and as a result, they don't want to serve in the military, and they object to it. There is that trend, and almost all democratic countries in the world actually have conscientious objection as a right for the citizens. I think it is part of democratization. EU actually, this is one of the things that EU wants from Turkey. EU believes that, you know, a voluntary military force would be one of the things that Turkey should achieve in the future. And Turkey actually has declared that it will professionalize its military forces in time. Not immediately, I don't expect that to happen right away, but a more professional military is supposed to be the goal in the future. So if the people don't want to fight, if the people don't want to serve in the military, that could change the nature of the nation state. I mean, there are states who disband their militaries, and they don't think that militaries are necessary. I gave the example of Japan, right? Japan did not have a military until recently, and it survived with the help of its alliances. So in the future, whatever we say after this will be speculation. We don't know what will happen. But with the data that we have, we can argue that the nation states seem to be quite adaptive, but at the same time, all these political units, such as city-states and empires, survived for 500, 600 centuries, empires more. So we don't know for sure that today's nation state will stay forever, will survive forever. Mehmet.
You gave examples of Israel and Turkey in inter-service, but these two countries have the most conflicts in the regions. I think there should be a voluntary, not voluntary, compulsory inter-service, but it's not. For instance, how can I fight in East with PKK terrorists with my university education? So government should promote some inter-service related to really
That's why, exactly, that's why I think the plan is to increase the number of professional soldiers. Professional soldier means that's your job. So yes, exactly, that's your job. We have professional soldiers, but we have the largest chunk of the military force in Turkey is the compulsory military service that come from compulsory military service. So the argument is if the military becomes more professional, it will be fighting more effectively. So yes, we have, well, data shows us that if you have trained soldiers, especially in war, in guerrilla war and in war against terrorism, you need to have professional soldiers. Because otherwise, you know, people just die because they don't know how to fight. And so that's one of the things that have been discussed in the last few months in the government and the military circles as a possible change to fight more effectively against terrorism. But don't forget, guys, that in the different times, in different countries, security is always a topic that is used to not change policies, you know, just to continue with the existing policies. So the critical theorists would argue that almost every issue is securitized. So this whole military and conscription issue is also securitized. Because we have so many security issues, well, we have to have this very large military. Is criticized by many critical scholars, okay, critical theorist scholars. So what we know for sure now is that nation states have survived because they were able to adapt according to Sprout. But there are also criticisms of Sprout's argument. I'll only give you a couple, not all of them, but just a couple of them. The first one is that it underemphasizes the effect of the military revolution, the importance of military revolution. So the criticism is that Sprout focuses too much on economy and revenue extraction, and it does not focus on wars as much. And other scholars, traditional scholars, conventional wisdom, argues that wars were the most important reason why nation states survived. So it was very simple. Nation states survived because they won wars. And that has nothing to do with extraction of resources and all that. So when you win wars, if Britain as a nation state wins wars, Britain survives. When France wins wars because it's a nation state and it's more effective as a nation state, so that's why nation states survived. So the traditional approach to why nation state in the international system survived is because they won wars. Whoever wins the war will survive. Another thing about Sprout's argument is Sprout actually focuses on internal divisions within city-states. So Sprout in your reading says that city-states have become weakened because there were too many internal divisions within the city-states. And the implication is, if the size of the state is larger, these internal divisions will not be as effective and will not lead to the collapse of the unit. A third one is that Sprout is neglecting the many very good aspects of empires, okay? So the argument is that empires were very efficient. They were very efficient until the rise of the nationalist ideology. So Sprout finds too many weaknesses in empires, but the conventional argument would say empires were doing fine until the World War, right? Until the Great War. So why did they survive until the Great War? They survived longer than city leagues, longer than city-states. Why is that? That's because the nationalist ideology led to the end, the demise of empires. So Sprout doesn't talk much about nationalism and how nationalism actually kills the empires. Okay, that's something that can be taken as a weakness of Sprout's argument. But guys, don't forget that every argument will have strengths and it will have weaknesses. That doesn't completely undermine Sprout's argument. It's just a weakness of it. City leagues. Sprout argues that city leagues were very weak because they did not have a political unity, and their military organization was not very effective because there was no political unity. Okay? So city leagues were not more expansionist than sovereign states. The real weakness with city leagues was that there was the collection action problem, according to the traditionalists. Okay? So all of these are the weaknesses of the argument, but what I want you to remember with the argument, with Sprout's argument, is that if we have one form of political organization today, that does not mean we're going to continue to have it for the rest of the time. And also another lesson or another point that we should take away with us is that there's certainly a learning period, a learning process, okay, in the international system. And each nation state or each political form looks at the other and learns from the other. That's what Sprout calls mimicry, okay? But I want to add to Sprout, and if I have time today and on Thursday, okay, I have some time, I'm going to talk about how wars actually contribute to state building and how wars change the internal dynamics in the states, okay? So I'm going to talk about war and regime type, meaning how do wars change the regime type in a state, or how a state is built, how a state is administered. And then I'm going to do that by looking at early legislatures, how did absolute monarchs, kings, right, rose, and how did they fall. And then I'm going to look at the relationship between wars and restriction of political rights and an expansion of political rights. In other words, guys, when you look at this slide, I want you to notice something. There's fall and there's rise. Something falls, the rise of the absolute, wars may lead to the rise of the absolute monarchs, and they may lead afterwards to the fall of absolute monarchs. Wars may actually restrict political rights, but they might also lead to more rights in terms of people's political rights, okay? So what I'm going to tell you is, wars are double-edged swords. Wars may actually lead to good things and bad things. If I ask you the question, is war a good thing? What would you say? You would say no. But then I would say women would probably still have no rights at all if it wasn't for the world wars. Can you actually start thinking that wars might actually be good, at least for women? Well, women start getting political rights because men die in wars. And as a result, women become the workforce. If you work, if you make money, you're going to get political rights. So I want you this week to think about wars in different ways, okay? Because we always say that wars kill people, wars, yes, they do. Wars kill people. So do diseases. Okay, thank you. Do you remember from the historical background that Black Plague killed more people than wars in Europe? In the 1600s, yes? Natural disasters, absolutely. They also kill people. But natural disasters, you're going to think that I'm horrible now. What is the nice thing about the earthquake that took place in Van? What a horrible question. Solidarity in the society. Everyone in Turkey wanted to help at least a huge population in Turkey. I'm not counting the extremists, right? So people wanted to help these people. And Israel, Turkey has tense relations with Israel these days, right? Israel actually sent a message and said, we would like to send you people to help, with the earthquake. Okay, so what I'm trying to get to here is, I don't want you to think about international phenomena one-sided. Because if you do, you're going to miss a huge part of the picture. So when I say wars, you should not only think about the killing and the misery and the horrible things that wars connotate. I'm also going to show you that wars actually contributed to political rights and state building, women's affairs, all kinds of things. I'm not, by the way though, I need to warn you here, I'm not arguing that wars are good things. I'm arguing that sometimes there are consequences of wars that lead to good things to happen, okay? So as a whole, I think wars are quite horrible. I would want wars to come to an end, of course we all want world peace and all. But we need to actually study wars from all aspects. And sometimes wars will lead to good things such as political rights. But there will be other times when wars will actually lead to restriction of rights. I lived in the US when 9/11 took place, and I know for a fact that war on terrorism actually led to restriction of political rights, right? Sumin, would you agree with that? The whole homeland security perspective of the government actually led to restriction of political rights in the US, in a country that's so proud of its civil liberties and civil rights. So there are negatives and positives. We're looking at both, okay? We're actually going to look at both. Let me start. I think I still have about 7-8 minutes. I'm just going to start with this and I'll finish it on Thursday. It's already at Moodle, okay, the presentation. And it would be great if you start reading Russet. Russet reading is also one of the articles mentioned in the assignment, okay? So Sprout, Gilpin, and Russet. 3 readings are your options for your assignment. And the assignment is due the 14th. Okay, all right. Now, 14th of November, after Bayram, yeah? Okay. More in the early legislatures. Now, kings. What, if I wanted to be a king, what would I care the most? What would I care about the most? My personal wealth, thank you. If I wasn't a king, that is the first thing I would care about anyways, isn't it? Everybody cares about their personal wealth or personal well-being. But the kings, okay, I would also care about loyalty. But honestly, loyalty would not be my priority. My priority would be wealth, yes. You were from the economics department, right? Okay. So you bring in the money to the discussion. And absolutely, the king wants taxes, okay? The king needs taxes because those taxes will be used in services that will be provided to the people so that they will, I will get their loyalty. And in return, if I get their loyalty to a certain extent, I can increase my personal wealth as well, okay? So what I need is taxes. And to be able to get the taxes, I need the consensus so that I will get the money that I want. And for that, the best mechanism to establish is to establish a high court or a parliament, right? Or an estate. Something, some sort of parliament. I'm not talking about a huge democratic parliament here. But if I get you guys in my parliament, and if I can get a consensus on a decision that I make, and the decision is, will I establish a disco by the parking lot at Bilkent? Then 4 of you are like, yes, yes, let's have that disco. It will be great. We can actually sell this to the public. So you are the intermediary between me, the king, and the public, the rest of you, okay? So that consensus that you give me will justify my policies. We talked about legitimacy, remember? So how do I legitimize myself? I legitimize myself through the parliament or the high court. Doesn't need to be a democratic establishment, but these people, and usually you will be my nobles. In a monarchy, you'll be the nobles and you will have land. And you're going to organize tax collection, okay? Resource extraction is what I'm talking about. Spruit also talked about resource extraction. I'll keep talking about it. Because extracting resources by using the nobles, the clergies, and the strong people in cities will help me to legitimize my regime, okay? So a state is what a parliament was called in France, a diet in Germany, parliament in England, Cortes in Spain. And these early estates, like I said, don't imagine a parliament like today. But these early estates are actually giving the nobles and clerics and other administrative guys a voice in the system, and they facilitate construction of consensus for wars. Don't forget, in those centuries, how do I extract resources? Through wars, okay? So I'll go conquer another territory and get their resources, their minerals, their, I don't know, their labor force. I'll enslave them. So in some way or another, I'm going to go to another place and I'm going to conquer that place. And to be able to do that, usually I need to go to a war. I need to fight against another territory. Okay. Would you like to die for me? No one does. It's too late, you know, you want to go home and you have better things to do and all that. Well, if I want you to die for me, but I have not invented the policy, the ideology of nationalism yet, my best choice is to convince them, to convince you that you should die for me. Okay? Let's just leave it at that. I want you to read Russet as soon as possible. I won't finish it, but I'll start it by Thursday. Thank you. Teşekkür ederim.